everyone, welcome back to my channel. My name is Regina, and in this homeschooling video, I am going to share 9 things that I do not do in my homeschool. So, if you are kind of new to the homeschool game like me, I am very new, just a few months in, then you probably watch a lot of YouTube videos and read a lot of blogs. At least that's what I do. That's how I learn. That's how I've gotten really great ideas about what to do, what not to do. Well, in a lot of those videos and a lot of those blogs, there is a lot of information, a lot of things that you might be thinking, okay, do I need to do this? Should I do this? Would it make my homeschool better? There is just so much out there, so many great things that people are doing to elevate their homeschools, but I'm here to give you permission, for whatever that's worth, the permission to not do all of those things. You do not have to do everything that's out there. Not even the people who are doing some of these great things are doing everything. So I just wanted to share with you 9 things that I am just not doing. Some of them, I think a lot of people aren't doing them, and some of them might be some unpopular opinions, but you know what? I'm okay with that. So let's get started. Okay, so the first thing that I am not doing in my homeschool and have no intention of doing unless something changes are morning baskets. So the premise behind morning baskets, of course, is that it's a basket of resources that the kids can start working on in the morning, maybe while they're waiting for breakfast or maybe right after breakfast. Before the school day really starts, they're working through activities in those morning baskets. A lot of times they're around a theme or something like that. They're all kind of connected in some way, but it's, things that the kids do that get them started in the morning. I don't do a morning basket or any morning baskets. It's just not something that I feel like we need. We start in the morning with breakfast, and then the kids have their checklists of things to do, except for my kindergartner. I sit with her. But my 2nd grader, my 5th grader, they have a checklist every week that has every day spelled out the activities that they're going to do. So when they finish, they don't have to wait. They just get started on their work. So for us, we don't need a morning basket per se. Now, I'm not saying there's no value in them. I'm not saying that nobody should do them. But for us, it's not something we need, and it's not something I plan to do. So the next thing that I do not do in my homeschool is have a strict schedule. Now, this is something that I did actually try. I had it all mapped out when I first started. We were starting at 9:30. We were doing, the kids were doing their math work at a certain time, their ELA at a certain time, and it just didn't work. It's hard to describe why. I think part of it is because I don't know if I cared that much about having such a strict schedule, in that it was kind of stressing me out. Now, I just left corporate America just a few months ago, where I had on average about 15, Zoom conference calls a week, and I worked with tight deadlines. So I'm used to working kind of on a schedule. But for homeschool, for some reason, it just was not working for us. We didn't always get up on time. Sometimes we took a long time eating breakfast. It just didn't work. And so I have, over the past few weeks or so, just kind of thrown that out the window. We still try to get started around 9:30. It's usually closer to 10 o'clock where we're actually starting to do work. Breakfast is done by then. But because of the way that I have it set up, where my 2nd grader, my 5th grader, I plan out their activities for the week based on how far they got the week before, and then print that out, give them everything at the beginning of the week. My 2nd grader, I map it out, she has each day paper clipped together, plus, instructions for things she's doing online. My son, he has everything put together for the week, but he does have each day laid out for what he's to do each day. It doesn't really matter what time we start, because they have it set to what they need to get accomplished that day. And if they get that accomplished, between 10 a.m. and 12 p.m., great. If it takes them a little longer because we start a little later, that's fine. It's their work to do. Right now, we don't have anywhere we have to be in the evenings. I know that'll change soon once we get back into gymnastics and karate, but it works for us. They still get the work done. It's just the exact time that we start and finish varies. Now, that flexibility does work for us. I I don't often, actually, I say always, I don't often like make breakfast for my older two kids. They usually get breakfast themselves, cereal, or they know how to make grits in the microwave. My daughter, my second grader, she sometimes will make oatmeal and add raisins, etc. So they know how to like feed themselves. So sometimes I'll get up, get started, and I'll be working with my kindergartner, and then they'll be getting their breakfast and they get their day started. So we don't have a super strict schedule, and that works fine. Now, remember, like I said, I do plan out the week. So each day, my children know what they need to do. So that is set. So the time at which they do it, now I do make them do their work before they can, watch TV or watch a movie on their tablets or do any of that stuff. They have to have the schoolwork done first. So they get it done. It's just that simple. But the exact timing of when they do it, the exact timing of when they take lunch breaks, that's kind of on them. Sometimes we'll do one all together, but oftentimes they just take a break when they're hungry, make themselves some lunch, because I also don't always make lunch or ever. I warm something up for my 5-year-old, or actually she's 4, my 4-year-old, but the other two, they make themselves lunch when they're hungry, and then they get back to their work. So that's just how it works. We don't have a strict schedule, and that works for us. Now, I want to give the other caveat too, is that we do all work kind of in the same, like we're all downstairs in one of the living areas. So I can see them. I do check in on them, as they're working. It's not just like, go do your thing. Like I do work with them. I am still their teacher. And we do we do social studies and science together. So, but we'll just grab a time when it makes sense to do those things. So the third thing that I do not do in my homeschool is we don't have a homeschool room. Now, I know that that's something that a lot of people do, but it just did not work for us. It just was not in the cards. Now, this doesn't mean that we will never, ever, ever have a homeschool room. Who knows how things may change. But for right now, the way that we have it set up works, and I have no plans to change it. So here's the deal. Now, when we first decided to homeschool, that was kind of my first thought, like where exactly in my house would I do it? So I considered my office, which, it's kind of a small-ish space, but it would be big enough to serve as a homeschool room. I just have 3 kids. But in my office is where I'm putting all of my plant stuff, like I have 2 big shelves that I use for seed starting in the spring. And it's kind of a big deal. I have a pretty big garden. So, I've got to have about 30 tomato plants and 30 pepper plants and a bunch of other stuff growing in there to get ready for spring. And so with that in there and a lot of my gardening stuff, I keep all of that in the office. Then there wouldn't also be space for all of our homeschool stuff and space for us to actually be in there all day without feeling crowded, because I also have my desk in there. So the office was out. And then upstairs, we do have an extra living room, and that right now actually is the playroom. The upstairs living room is the playroom for the kids. And there's a TV up there, and there's tons of space. But the issue with the playroom is that our guest room is right next to it, and my husband uses that as his office, and he works from home 3 days a week. So I didn't want us doing homeschool right next to his office, because sometimes he's on conference calls, not to mention, the work that he does. He probably wants some quiet so that he can focus. So I decided against that. So what we ended up doing is that downstairs we have kind of our main den area where the TV is, and then we have an additional living area and a dining room off to the side. We don't use the dining room as a dining room. We only have 1 table, and that lives in the kitchen. So we had that space open. And so we kind of use that, and we use essentially the entire downstairs area as our homeschool room. I have a bookshelf in my office that I do have some homeschool books and supplies on it. And then I have an old TV stand that we were actually gonna put outside on the side of the road for someone to pick up, that I decided to keep because I keep most of our day-to-day supplies and things like that sit on there in the living room. And so when I sit with my 5-year-old, I keep calling her 5-year-old, she'll be 5 in 2 months, cannot wait. But my 4-year-old, when I sit on the couch with her and we do our reading lessons, our math lesson, then I sit in that area. And then we had a smaller computer desk that used to be my husband's. I guess it's technically still his. But that we weren't really using. So we put that in the corner because it's a corner unit. And my son sits there and does most of his work there. And then my daughter usually does her work at the kitchen table. And whenever we come together to do like social studies, we usually just sit on one of those couches, or sometimes in the other living room, we just sit on the couch in there and we just sit together and read or do whatever it is that we're doing all together, having a discussion about something. We just find one of those areas. And that works for us because we're out of my husband's hair if he's working, and you know, the kitchen is right there if the kids need to get a snack or they're having lunch or breakfast or something. So it just kind of works. So we're all in the same space where I can easily float amongst my children when they're doing their own work, or if I need to help them with something, or if they get stuck, and I can hear what's going on, see what they're doing, but we're not like all on top of each other. So that works perfectly for us, which is why I said I don't think I'll be making changes anytime soon to actually create a specific homeschool space for us. So the fourth thing that I do not do in my homeschool that I've seen is very popular is poetry tea time. Now this is one of those rabbit holes that I went down when I was really starting to plan my homeschool. I was still working full time, but I was doing a lot of planning because I knew, you know, it was coming soon. I left my job at the end of August, and you know, we started school Labor Day, right after Labor Day. So there wasn't that much time in between. So I was doing a lot of research while I worked, not during my work day, let me clear that up, but you know, like in the evenings and stuff. And poetry tea time kind of fascinated me, right? Like, you know, you read poetry, you have tea time. It just sounded really cool and fancy. But the more I read into it, the more I was like, you know what? Like, I don't have time for this. It sounds really cool. If I got invited to a poetry tea party, I would definitely go. It makes me think of Bridget Jones's Diary when they're in the boats reading poetry to each other. Sounds kind of cool. But no, like the thought of my kids getting to go to this really fun tea party and us dressing up maybe and reading poetry does sound cool, but it is not something I'm about to organize and do regularly. It just isn't. But those of you that do it, you keep living your lives because I think it looks really cool. All right, so the fifth thing that I do not do in my homeschool is dictation or copy work. Now this one I really had to research because in a lot of the videos that I watched, there are a lot of great homeschool YouTubers out there, by the way, but in a lot of the videos I watched, they would talk through their schedules or things like that and say, okay, well now at this time we do our dictation and this time we do our copy work. And I'm like, what is it? Because it's not something, most of the stuff I could connect to my own schooling experience. I went to public school, but usually the concepts you can relate back. I mean, I went to public school and I was a teacher for 5 years. So, and I taught ELA, you know, and SLA and math, but I figured I would know. So I did not know what this was. I mean, okay. Obviously I know what dictation means, but I didn't know exactly what it meant in like a school setting. And so I've done some reading on it because I wanted to make sure, like, is there something that I need to be doing that I'm not doing? And I understand the premise behind it, that students, you know, are learning really good grammar and good writing by doing copy work, which is copying, you know, specific passages that demonstrate, you know, this specific type of writing and this excellent grammar, and that helps students learn it. And the dictation part is, you know, them hearing a sentence and then writing it, but, you know, spelling things correctly and punctuating it correctly. So doing those two things. Now, the copy work thing, I don't know how I feel about it, like, but I'm sure there's some sort of scientific something behind it, which I have not read. So I don't have a major opinion on it, except that it just sounds a little bit boring. And dictation, I think dictation probably could be something helpful for students, you know, to practice their grammar, to practice punctuating things correctly. The reason why I'm not doing those is because I don't want to. It's like we have some other things that we're doing. Like we are focusing a lot on writing. I taught, you know, English language arts 4 of the 5 years that I taught. And I also then after that, you know, I worked in marketing for 5 years for an ed tech company where I did almost nothing but copywriting, writing blogs, writing web copy. So I'm pretty strong in the grammar sense. And so is my husband. And so my kids hear good grammatical examples, so their grammar is actually already pretty strong. And then through our writing and through language arts lessons, will fill in the gaps and make sure that they have the very specific lessons they need to have strong grammar and strong writing skills. So it's not that I necessarily am knocking those practices as if they won't work and it can be helpful. It's just that like we're pretty full of things already that we're doing, and I did not want to add that to it because I don't think my kids would particularly enjoy it, and I don't think I would either. So we're not doing copy work or dictation. Okay, so prepare yourselves. The sixth thing that I'm not doing in my homeschool that I know a lot of people do, this is an unpopular opinion, I'm sure, but novel studies. I know, right? Like, probably throwing tomatoes at me by now. But novel studies are just not for me. And actually, when I was a teacher, novel studies were not for me then either. Now, we do read novels, and we did read novels when I was a teacher. But what I have found with my kids is that, and with me, like when we read novels, the novels that we like to read, like for instance, right now I'm reading Harry Potter and the Goblet of Fire with my 5th grader. And with my 2nd grader, we're currently reading a novel called Ways to Make Sunshine. I'll put some images up here somewhere. Y'all, editing Regina always gets annoyed at presenter Regina because I'm always promising stuff. But I'll put some images of the Ways to Make Sunshine book because it's really great. We're really enjoying it. It's a bluebonnet book here in Texas, so we wanted to check it out. So we are reading novels, but with novel studies where you do a series of lessons tied specifically to a novel over the period of time that you're reading the novel, I don't care for it. And the reason why is that it just seems like it takes us so long to read the novel. I don't like tying up that much of our English language arts instruction to that one book. And so you can do it that way, right? Where it is the English language arts instruction, the vocabulary is tied to it, grammar is tied to it. And I actually bought a novel study for Harry Potter and the Goblet of Fire in order to do that. But the book is so long. Like, we'd be doing it for like 10 weeks and I just didn't want to. It just felt like too long to be focusing just on that. Now, the other option, of course, is to do the novel study on top of your regular English language arts and reading instruction. So then you have kind of like twice the work. And I didn't want to do that either because some lessons we're learning about fiction, some lessons we're learning about nonfiction. And I kind of like that we're doing it little by little that way, in the way that they're learning ELA and reading. My son uses Khan Academy for his reading instruction, like the comprehension skills, and then we supplement that with practice from different sources. And my daughter, she's using Reading Express, and then each lesson, so it's kind of a self-contained, some of them focus on fiction, some of them focus on nonfiction, but they have different comprehension skills that she's learning through that. And so I didn't want to pause that to have to do a novel study and do all these other activities, and I didn't want to add those on because that would just be a lot of work for them. So what we do instead is that our English language arts work is through the curriculums that we're using that I just mentioned. And, but the novels, we just read those in the evenings or sometimes in the afternoons if we have time. So I'll just sit with my son, we'll read a chapter of Harry Potter. We talk about it, we discuss it, we talk about the characters, what we would do in those situations, we laugh about it. So we enjoy it, and he gets, a lot of the, we discuss those comprehension skills that you would do in a novel study, but that's kind of where it ends with us discussing it. Now, I do give him vocabulary each week. He gets 4 new vocabulary words, and I actually have been pulling those from Harry Potter because I have that novel study that I'm not really using, but it has the vocabulary listed, and there's some really great words in that book. So I have been pulling his vocabulary from that book because it's just convenient. And sometimes if he has a lesson in Khan Academy, maybe he's analyzing characters for fiction, then I might give him an assignment. I might write an assignment for him where he has to do that with one of the characters from Harry Potter because I know that we're reading it, so I know where we are in the book. So I can pull it in where it makes sense, but we're not doing full novel studies. With the book I'm reading with my 2nd grader, same thing. We just kind of read it in the evenings. We'll read a couple chapters and we discuss it. This book, you can talk about, like, what are Ryan's feelings here? What would you do? How are you thinking about that? Or, what's happening with her family, making sure she's understanding it. So we're hitting on those comprehension skills, talking about things that good readers do, but it's just kind of us having a discussion and us just really getting to enjoy the book and not having to do a bunch of stuff with it or tie my ELA and reading to it. Okay, so the seventh thing that I'm not doing in my homeschool is co-ops. I have a couple of reasons for this. The first reason I am not doing a co-op is because COVID. I am probably extra cautious when it comes to the pandemic, which is why I'm pretty excited. I mean, I'm taping this November 2021. Let me date this, because if somebody's watching this a year from now, it'll seem irrelevant, maybe, hopefully. But yeah, like, I just don't want to have to deal with being around a bunch of people that all have different viewpoints when it comes to the precautions they're taking with the virus. Now, my kids will actually get vaccinated pretty soon, so I'm kind of excited about that. And so that'll change that part of the equation, except for the 4-year-old, she'll have to wait. But that's kind of the first reason. The second reason is that it's another one of those that I'm just not particularly interested in it. I, just being honest, am very introverted. So I just do not want to have to make myself deal with people that I don't know for an extended period of time. Of course, I'd get to know them, but I don't really want to. I don't want to go and have to work with other people and get my kids involved in this and make friends. And I know it sounds ridiculous, but it's just true. I don't want to do it. And now I know some people say, yeah, but your kids need the socialization from it and the instruction from it. Well, I used to be a teacher. I taught for 5 years. I have an advanced degree in education. I feel comfortable teaching the content and the things that I don't know we can learn together. And it doesn't mean I will never, ever, ever participate in a co-op, right? Like, we're just getting started and I'm just not ready. But the other piece is that I'm not too worried about the socialization. We have, several family members nearby that have kids around my kids' age, so they get to socialize with them. And now that they're about to get vaccinated, we'll get them back in gymnastics and sign back up in karate. And then at the start of the year, I've already done the research on this, but we're going to sign them up in Girl Scouts and Boy Scouts so that they can be a part of a group that is a little more social, where they're actually engaging with other kids and making some friends. So we have plans in place to make sure they get some formal socialization. So I'm not too worried about that piece either. And of course, we go to the park all the time, so they're always engaging with other kids. So that's why I don't do co-ops, because put simply, I don't want to. Okay, so the 8th thing that I do not do in my homeschool is nature journaling. Now, I have to admit, this does look kind of cool, and we actually really like nature. I have a gigantic garden in my backyard. I would say about at least half of my garden is half of my backyard is taken up by a garden where we grow all kinds of vegetables, and now we have some fruit trees, and we have all kinds of things going back there. So we like nature, we like being outside. We also like to go hiking at a nature preserve that's nearby, and then in our nature trail in our neighborhood, we call it a nature trail, it's paved and people's houses are back there, but there's some trees, so it feels like nature. So we like being outside. We like exploring nature. My kids always call it, when we go to the nature preserve, going on an adventure. But I just, they like it, I like it. I didn't want to turn it into a formal learning thing because they're getting a lot out of it already. And so I didn't want to make it into work. And that's kind of the main reason. Doesn't mean that we'll never ever go on a hike, and then maybe Monday or Tuesday during homeschool I might say, hey, you remember we went on that hike and we saw this thing? This is called X, and we're going to talk about it in science today. So it doesn't mean that we'll never make connections, or that on those hikes we'll never go out there and be looking for something specific for school. I don't mean to say I'll never make that connection. But I like that we get to do those things, and those things are kind of fun things that we do. And I don't have to like add more work. I don't have to turn it into okay, now you need to write this in your journal or whatever. So that's why, because we do it, we like it, they're familiar with it. I actually quizzed my son and my daughter because I haven't taught them really like, the plant cycle or photosynthesis. And so I just wanted to know what they knew. And they knew a whole lot. And it's probably because they've helped me grow seedlings and then transplant outside, and how I talk about sun and rain. And so they absorb a lot of that stuff if they're exposed to it. And so I've learned that I don't have to make that into a thing for them to get a lot out of it. So the 9th thing that I do not do in my homeschool is actually kind of connected to the 8th thing, but it's that I don't feel like everything has to be a formalized written activity in order to count as learning. So for instance, for social studies right now, we are reading a book. I'll put a picture of it on the screen. It's called Politics and Government. But my son and daughter and I, we sit on the couch and we read a few chapters of this book and discuss it, talk about the different types of government. And then now we've gotten to the US and the type of government we have here and what that means. And now we're starting to look at the specific people that occupy those posts and how they get there. So we're learning about government and politics, but we're mostly doing it by reading a book. And it's a cute book. It's by Usborne, I think. I don't know. Another mom YouTuber recommended it, so I bought it, and we really like it. But that's how we're learning. That's our social studies right now, is me and those two sitting on the couch reading that book and talking about our government and looking things up and discussing it. Because they're getting it, they're retaining it as much as they need to at this age. And that's working. My goal is for them to understand the basics of how our government works, local, state, and national, and that's what they're learning. So, in my opinion, sometimes that's enough. It doesn't have to be a formal written product, and I think some of this I might be saying because I had to say it to myself, because I was a classroom teacher, and it was almost like if the kids didn't write it down and turn something in, then it didn't happen, And so understanding that that's one of the really cool benefits of homeschool is that you're with each child individually. You can talk to them and see if they know something. And then you can note that, okay, noted, she knows what photosynthesis is. Noted, he understands what our government structure is. And that's the goal. And so you can prove that and your kids can demonstrate that in different ways than they do in a traditional setting just because of efficiency and semantics. So that's a nice thing that I don't do in my homeschool. Thank you for sticking around to the end of this video. I hope that you found this content helpful, that you maybe found some things that you can breathe a sigh of relief that you're also not doing, or maybe you're doing some of the things that I'm not doing and that works perfectly fine for you. That works too. Either way it goes, hopefully you found this content educational or entertaining or whatever it is that helps you to stay to the end, because I appreciate it. So thanks for sticking around. If you like this video, please click that like button. That's the best way to help YouTube's algorithms get it out to more people. And of course, subscribe. You're one of the early ones at this point. So thank you. Have a great day.